The Bogeymen. Call me callous, but I don't particularly like being wakened in the middle of the night by pounding on my front door and the sound of a child's hysterical voice, or by anyone's hysterical voice for that matter. I live alone. I like it that way, and I especially don't like having my sense of privacy intruded upon. I suppose this feeling goes back to a particular incident which occurred in my childhood. My family had just sat down to dinner when the kitchen window suddenly went bang. Tinkle, tinkle, and one side of the curtain moved as a puff of air like a breath of fear came through where the glass had just been. Though it was only some unknown thing that had put a window out, the feeling at the time was that our home was no longer our home. It was as though that feeling of safeness, of familiarity, had been blown out through that same hole, like air escaping from a popped balloon. Our house, our home, was somehow never quite the same after that. Things deteriorated. Relationships broke down. Mom and Dad got divorced. We all grew apart and never saw each other again. I myself had been convinced that the bogeyman had broken into our house. My childhood after that point was fraught with nightmares and nighttime fears. To the psychiatrist I'd been sent to, this was further evidence of the bad effect my dysfunctional family was having, that the sooner my family got away from each other, the better. This all came back to me as I got out of bed, turned on the light, put on my housecoat, and made my way downstairs to the front door. Turning on the porch light and opening the door, I felt more anger than sympathy towards the noisy intruder. As suddenly the storm of emotion was blown out of me. It was a child, the youngest daughter of my neighbor. She was no more than 6, and stared up at me with a child's desperation, the kind that no normal human being is able not to respond to. "Amanda? What are you doing up at this time of night?" She blubbered something inarticulate, something about bogeymen being in the house. Going cold inside, I picked her up and cautiously made my way to the front door of her house. The front door was open, and all the lights were off. I switched the porch light on first so that all the neighbors could see what was going on. Then I started turning on the inside lights. What I saw was enough to convince me that they were dead. All 5 of them. I neglected to mention that my neighbors were also my second cousins. I will do so now. We didn't really know each other growing up or otherwise, and the familial thing meant little or nothing to us. The long and short of it was that I was Amanda's closest living relative. I was asked to take her in. This was a very difficult time for both of us. I knew absolutely nothing about children, especially not about little girls. Amanda was badly in need of someone to love and nurture her, to see her through her loss, to help her grieve, and to help her repair the gaping hole that had been blown through her life. I was all too familiar with that gaping hole, and was suddenly made painfully aware that I had tried, for the past 30 years, to run away from it myself. It seemed that my own journey had finally come full circle. I simply couldn't run anymore. Like Amanda, my fear of bogeymen hadn't started with a mere broken window. Before that incident, the bogeymen were always outside, lurking in the shadows, or taking the form of a bare branch groping and wavering in the winter wind, always trying to find a way in. It was early fall. Amanda was just starting school, and I was learning to adjust to her schedule. A month after the incident, I was making both of us a pancake breakfast. My family called them hotcakes, and I still do. I had just given Amanda hers and had started cooking my own when there was a knock at the front door. "Come in!" I shouted. What the hell? My privacy was no longer my own anyway. It was Jody, a woman cop who had taken Amanda for a few days. Apparently she was off duty. I had to smile, thinking that she didn't look quite so butch without her uniform. Actually, she wasn't bad looking, other than a slightly hard look she had probably acquired from her line of work. She and Amanda shared a look that I would never understand as she came into the kitchen. "Hiya, sport!" Amanda smiled and looked at me expectantly, prompting me to say, "You're just in time for breakfast." I expected her to refuse, but she didn't. After a few minutes, we were all seated around the table. "I'm afraid this isn't entirely a social call," she said. "Didn't think it would be," I replied. She gave me an appraising look. We think the perps were after people of a particular name, she said carefully. Hmm, my second cousin's name, my name, me. Any theories? I asked her. Amanda was, thankfully, not even trying to follow our conversation. Some real nut bars, she replied, helping herself to seconds. I think you've had some experience with them in the past. Feeling blank, I said, what makes you say that? Recognize this? Reaching down to her briefcase, she took out and handed me a child's school workbook. On the front, in my own childish script, was my name, age, grade, and division. Faintly, I said, where did you get this? I remember losing it when I was in grade 1. It was in Amanda's room, she replied, watching me carefully. Groping futilely for words, I said, how? Brusquely, before I could respond, she said, look, you might like this idea. You might hate it, but we watch your house. Add electronic security. Replace your windows with something more substantial if you get my meaning. And she added, I move in with you to deal with them when they make their move. Why you? I asked, suspicious. She smiled, her expression both direct and evasive. Because no one else will. Besides, this is my little plan. It's not authorized. Sarge would have a fit if he knew I was here, talking to you about this. Why would you do this? I asked her. She smiled at Amanda, who was still stuffing her face obliviously. Oh, personal reasons. When Jody moved in, I don't know what I was expecting. It disturbed me that Amanda took to her so easily for no reason that I could put into words. Maybe I was jealous as well for some reason. Having bulletproof glass installed in the windows made me more, not less nervous. Before I was only wondering about trouble, now I was expecting it. But I came to understand the hardness about Jody's look, especially around her eyes and mouth. And in an odd way to appreciate and accept those things about her. It's odd sometimes the things that make you trust someone. Amanda often slept with Jody. Her nights were plagued with bad dreams and fears no child should have to bear. I, too, would wake at the sound of her shrill voice. And I would remember. One night, I quite literally heard something go bump. Downstairs, in the cellar, dressed in my bathrobe, flashlight in one hand, baseball bat in the other, I gingerly made my way downstairs. I tensed the instant my feet made contact with the cold concrete of the cellar floor. Something moved in the darkness, fluttering like bats' wings. Peering around in frustration, I could see nothing. Heart pounding, I quickly made my way to where the basement light hung and pulled the chain. For an instant, out of the corner of my eye, I had seen it, scurrying up the wall and out the open cellar window. The hair on the back of my neck literally stood up as I realized that the cellar windows had all been boarded up years ago. Guess we missed something. Geez. Momentarily scared witless by her unexpected presence, I watched as Jody made her way to the cellar window. You should have a look at this. I did so. There were claw and bite marks on the broken, rotting boards. Better get this fixed, she told me. Tonight. I'll have forensics take a look at this, pronto. Well, I asked her the following night when she got off work. She huffed. May as well have been banshees and demons. You get the basement done? I smirked, tacitly getting her supper ready. Steel reinforced concrete. If that won't keep the bogeymen out, nothing will. Her guarded look caught my attention more than if she had shouted at me. Maybe it's time you started telling me about your personal reasons, I told her. Slowly, she acquiesced without looking at me. Okay, but stop me if you think I'm nuts. She sighed and took a sip of her coffee. When I was Amanda's age, the same thing happened to me. Your family was killed? She nodded. All except me. She looked me directly in the eye. Just like you. And like you, I spent my life finding ways to fight back. Shaking my head, I said, You're not making sense. My family wasn't killed. Not then, and not all at one. but one by one, it got to them. Taking a deep breath, wondering if I really wanted to hear the answer, I said, "So, how have I been fighting back?" "Almost the same way I have," she told me. "By not caring, except somewhere, way down deep, so they wouldn't have an excuse to come after us again. It's the fear they're after." I would have dismissed this as crazy talk were it not for the fact that I knew with intimacy the forces that had shaped my own life. But, wait a minute, why are they still trying to get in? Her look, if not her words, chilled me to the bone. Because Amanda made us remember the fear. They're coming for all three of us now. Later, with Jody at work and Amanda in school with the quiet house to myself, I began to question what was happening. Bogeymen. Paranoia was more like it. We were feeding off each other's fear. Amanda was simply afraid of the dark. Jody. Well, Jody was being delusional. I made a mental note to talk this matter over with her when she got home from work. I was just getting ready to go out when the phone rang. It was Amanda's school. Amanda and some of the other kids had been attacked by something that had come out of the bushes and disappeared again. Amanda was hysterical, and could I please come and get her? When I arrived at the front of the school, there were several parents milling about in front, as well as a couple of police cars. I found Amanda in the nurse's office. She was snuffling quietly and looked pretty shaken up. I will never be able to describe my feelings when she saw me, when I picked her up and she threw her little arms tightly around my neck. "I've gotcha. Let's go home." We were almost at the front entrance when two people, a young teacher and an older cop in uniform, cut me off. "We aren't sure what happened," the young woman said apologetically. "It happened so fast. Mr. Adams, the gym teacher, jumped in and got clawed up pretty badly." "Did he say what it was?" Perhaps noting my guarded look, the cop said, "If it had been a mad dog or cougar or a bear, he would have said so." But he didn't. "It was a monster," said Amanda quietly with utter certainty. Holding me with his eyes, the cop said, "That's pretty much what Mr. Adams says. And now I'd like you to get in your car and follow me." "Where?" "General Hospital. Jody's there. I'd like you to pick her up and take her home." Jody's partner of 3 years was dead, I was told by the cop who guarded her door. His look said plainly that she had endured enough, that I had better measure up to... To what? Her appearance hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't how badly injured she was. It was something in her eyes that I had always feared to discover in my own. That mixture of fear and defeat one sees in the eyes of prey as the predator closes in, when exhaustion has ended all chance of flight, when all hope has been leached from the body like a gaping hole in the center of one's chest. On the way home, holding Amanda, Jody told me in an almost mechanical voice that her own injuries weren't bad, that her partner had died trying to protect her. It had ripped his throat out, the older officer had told me earlier. And as Jody spoke in detached terms about what had happened, the background of my thoughts ran with snatches of such words like gouts of warm blood from quivering, torn flesh. As we sat down to supper, to my great relief, Jody managed to smile at me as she tucked a napkin under Amanda's chin. "Don't you ever get tired of being a house husband?" "Husband?" I thought to myself before answering. "I've been a bachelor for a long time. It's having people around that takes a bit of getting used to." Again that smile. "You're doing okay." She began cutting up Amanda's pork chop, I knew, without even having to think about doing so. There were 1,000 little things like that which she did more or less automatically, things that would never have occurred to me. Without thinking, I said, "None of us should be sleeping alone after what happened today." It wasn't until the words were out of my mouth that I found myself stammering, "That... it wasn't what I meant." "It's true," Jody said with a quiet certainty. "And it is what you meant, whether you know it or not." It was true. The three of us slept soundly for the first time since the ordeal began. Amanda in the middle, buried underneath the covers, deep in her cocoon of protective warmth and reassurance. After 2 weeks of this, as Jody recovered from her injuries, we began to hope that the worst was over. But one night I heard a sound downstairs. Drawn unwillingly from my warm bed, I made my way downstairs to the living room. There was a scrabbling sound and an all too familiar hiss coming from the chimney, making its way down the flue to the fireplace. Automatically, I grabbed a bunch of newspapers, pulled them apart and balled them up, and tossed them onto the empty scuttle. Then, retrieving a can of barbecue starter from the cupboard, I wet the entire pile, found the matches sitting on the mantel, struck one into guttering flame and light, and tossed it onto the sodden pile. There. In the sudden garish light, I saw its inverted head poking out of the chimney. Its oval maw was ringed with thin, inwardly hooked teeth, and its eyes were chilling and deadly as staring down the muzzle of a loaded gun. Caught in the louver, it began thrashing and squealing in enraged pain. Reflexively, I grabbed a piece of firewood and began clubbing the thing. To my surprise and horror, it caught the timber in its mouth and easily bit through it with a splintering snap. Despite the heat and flame, which was quickly dying, the creature was still trying to make its way inside. "Get out of the way!" The sound of Jody's voice made me jerk out of the way, as though through sheer will alone she was somehow able to force me to react quickly enough. 6 shots. I will never forget them. A .38 makes a sound like small firecrackers going off, and the creature burst into flame. For an instant, the two of us shared a vindicated look, but only for an instant. The scrabbling sound had begun again. "There's more coming," she blurted. Instantly, knowing full well that my hand would be burned, I grabbed the still-hot louver and closed it. "I'll get Amanda," she said. Grimacing in pain, I replied, "No." "I'll get Amanda. You reload your gun and get some bullets. It's the only weapon we've got, and you're the only one who knows how to use it." When we met downstairs once more, we saw, to our horror, that the creatures were forcing their way in once more, and I realized that the design of the louver was largely to blame. It was designed to slow hot air and smoke from going up the chimney, not to prevent things from trying to get in. Abruptly, all was frenzy and chaos as Jody and I began tossing wood and anything that would burn into the fireplace and setting it alight, as Amanda began screaming at the shapes trying to force their way in. "Phone's been cut!" Jody shouted as I pounded with my baseball bat on a gray, ash-colored arm as it groped its way from the flue. The arm was withdrawn, but despite the fire and smoke, others were pulling at the louver. It was only a matter of time. "Damned louver!" I grated, pounding away at reaching arms. Jody was on the floor now, gun pointed up into the chimney, firing off the odd round, trying to conserve the few bullets she had left. "It's working exactly the wrong way." Jody fired off her last round and gave me a look, eyes wide. Maybe not. With a kick, she opened the louver wide. Then she grabbed the barbecue starter and sprayed around the living room until it was empty. Too stunned to think, I could only follow her lead as she grabbed Amanda and dragged me by the hand to the front door. It wasn't until we stood out in the street watching the house begin to burn vigorously that I finally understood, hearing the despairing shrieks coming from inside. "I hope you're insured," Jody muttered, the firelight's reflection glittering in hers and Amanda's eyes as they watched. I am now. It was over. Something new had begun. And with something like confidence, I took Jody in my arms and kissed her.